Hi, Sharon Danley here. As promised, there's a live stream today talking about International Women's Day, and I'm going to be joined shortly with guest Penny McLean. It's after the fact, but we just didn't have time beforehand. And I want to give a big shout out to all of the women who've gone before us and paved a pathway against incredible odds just to get the vote. Just to do that. And there's still a lot more to do. We hear about women who've been made famous in the media, but so many where we haven't heard anything about them. So what I wanted to do was give you what a friend of mine, Dennis Rancourt, wrote yesterday. Hello, Penny. I'm just about to do this, and then we'll be listening to you. This was from Dennis Rancourt yesterday, which I think summed it up beautifully. Women's Day. The CBC, that's our Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, covered the Ottawa Mayor's Breakfast event for Women's Day. Now, Ottawa is our capital in Canada. There was not a word about women oppressed by the CAS and manipulated by family courts in Ontario, fighting to keep their own children. Not a word about homeless women in Ottawa. Not a word about the state of public housing, ghettos, and slumlord predation. Not a word about social status and how it correlates to health. Not a word about the conditions in women's prisons. Not a word about Aboriginal women who fight for dignity and against Ottawa developer plight. Not a word about the indignity of social aid services. Not a word about Ottawa's Liberal government supporting Saudi Arabia in the active genocide against Yemen. Not a word about the immoral blockade strangulation of Gaza. More salary equity among professional classes and more female CEOs and foreign ambassadresses. That's pretty much the depth of the mayor's bacon and eggs Woodstock, as covered by CBC. Thank you, Dennis, for being exacting about what's going on. Now, Penny, we're going to turn it over to you. And welcome.
Well, thank you. And good morning, ladies. Happy International Women's Day. I've noticed I've been teaching International Women's Day programs for about 10 years now in the jails. And I'll tell you, up until this year, I haven't heard a lot in the news. It's generally not well celebrated in Canada or in the United States to the level that it is around the world. And IWD is a time for women who make up half of this planet to celebrate where we've come from, the fight for equality and social justice, and to look at where we need to go as well. So one thing that I do bring up, because sometimes we think we've got it bad in this country, and I'd like to point out that what's going on around the globe is not nearly as wonderful as some of the things that we have access to. For example, about 25,000 brides in India are burned to death every year for having an insufficient dowry. And then the husband is free to go and marry another woman. Oftentimes, it's cast as either a suicide or an accident. When we look at something like acid burnings, human trafficking, a global epidemic, and even in Canada, in our very sacred, happy-go-lucky, everybody apologizes Canada, as I'm talking to you, 30,000 women and girls, 93% of whom are Canadians, are being humanly trafficked across this country. When we look at things like education that's being denied, or young girls being beaten by their own fathers for trying to attend school, the maternal mortality rate in the world, it's incomprehensible to us, but 600,000 women die every year in childbirth. That shouldn't be happening. Rape being used as a tool of war. We know that's happening in multiple countries around the world. And when we look at a number for female genital mutilation, hold on to your hat, between 100 and 140 million women and girls is estimated by UNICEF have been subjected to female genital mutilation. So what's going on around the world? Sure, we've got the vote. Suffragettes have struggled and paid a high price, as so many women have before them, to create social justice. And we celebrate every gain that we make. We need to understand that not every sister by another mister on the planet is having the access to the supports, the education, the health care, and the safety that many of us enjoy. So it's a time for us, for those of us who do enjoy those good things, to appreciate it, be grateful, and to also turn our eye to say, what else can we do to stop these other things from happening? So, you know, there is good news. And Sharon, you and I have been discussing some of that you've researched. For example, what's going on in Spain this week?
Yes. Yes, with the first wildcat strike of women anywhere in the world, saying they're not going to put up with this anymore. And in Italy, a transport strike by the women. Fantastic. These are things to really be celebrated. And it seems like the women, other than in North America, seem to really be motivated and mobilized to push for change.
Push for change in a nonviolent way.
Yes.
Push for change respectfully.
Yes.
Without hurting people.
Exactly. Exactly. We don't have to go to war to make change or to change somebody's thinking. All we have to do is stop. When we bring it into the beauty arena, one of the ways we can help stop stuff is don't buy any beauty magazines. Just don't buy any. You know, we don't have economic equality. We don't have equality in other things, but we have great power in what we don't do, what we don't buy, and what we won't partake in. And it's nonviolent.
Absolutely. So, for example, when I was just talking about maternal mortality rates, and we think back to the time when there was that devastating earthquake in Haiti, and I worked with a group of women. We created birthing kits to send to Haiti to support them, because Haiti has the highest maternal mortality rate in the world. And we were sending aid as well. And I learned from a very reliable source that they stopped handing out food to the men because they found they were black marketing the food. They were selling it, the free food that was coming in. And so they took it away from the men and they gave it to the women. And it was all freely distributed to the women. And guess what happens?
I bet I know.
Every single woman ate, every single man ate, young people ate, old people ate, sick people ate, everyone did, because it was freely shared. And I think that having women's representation in higher levels, when we empower women, we empower the human race.
We do.
Women bring a thoughtfulness, a nurturing, a nonviolent approach to negotiating the safety and the well-being of all. And that's why we need more women represented in positions of authority, so that they can bring that other view to the forefront for a democracy to make that decision. Less guns, more women.
Yeah, it seems like a simple formula, doesn't it? Yet we know that that's not the way those who are in power want it, because they want to hold on to that power. And it's a real struggle to try to change that. You know, some people think that things are changing, and well, Yeah, but it's still at a snail's pace. It's still at a huge snail's pace. But the thing is, if we just didn't do stuff, everybody could not do stuff. Everybody. Everybody. So there's no divisiveness in color, culture, gender. We all just don't do stuff. We don't buy. We don't do
Absolutely.
these things, and it would make change.
And I'm just seeing a comment from our darling Rebecca. Hello, Rebecca. I hope you didn't get snowed in by that nor'easter. I heard you'd lost some power out there on the East Coast. Rebecca's saying, only when we remember to work together, all too often, I see women competing with each other.
Yes, that
Ain't
does
that the truth?
happen
Ain't that the
because
truth?
yeah, and it's because we've been socialized. You see, it's like a dysfunctional family. If you take John Bradshaw's, who's a family systems therapist, the whole idea of the mobile, for those that remember it, when the parents are good parents, the mobile moves smoothly. But when the parents are fighting or there's problems, any number of them, and there's no leadership, shall we say, in the parental role, the kids end up fighting, and they end up fighting with each other. And that's exactly what's happened in society. Because our leaders are not leading, we have racism, we have cultural problems, we have gender divisiveness amongst women, we have competition, we have it because we have it everywhere. It's because there's dysfunction within society.
Absolutely.
So how can we stop that? Well, I love this term. When you clean off your own stoop first and not worry about your neighbors, just worry about your own and clean up your own act, in other words, it changes everything. Because you're more concerned about how am I behaving? How am I doing? How am I kind? Am I forgiving? Do I lend a helping hand? Can I do one thing a day to help somebody, even if that's just smiling? Yes, random acts of kindness,
Random
whatever
acts
they
of
are.
kindness.
You know, let's not worry about what our neighbors are or aren't doing. Let's think about more about what we are or aren't doing. Again, that's a
And
simple way to do things.
consider a random act of kindness to yourself.
That too.
What's wrong with that?
That's
Random
exactly
acts of
right.
kindness for yourself. Because as I put out before, when you're in that airplane and the cabin pressure drops and those masks drop down, you put it on yourself first. Because then you can do random acts of kindness without feeling resentful. You can be more understanding because you're grounded and you're happy and you're content and you're confident with yourself.
Yes. Yes. Exactly.
Because kindness, if it comes with resentment, or if it comes with guilt, or it comes with any of those negative things, cannot sustain itself.
Mm-hmm.
It
No.
can only sustain itself when it's coming from a heart that's well fed. And I'm going to just jump in with a little suffragette stuff or some women's action. In 1912, over 100 years ago, there was a huge and famous strike in a textile factory in the United States where the living conditions were deplorable. Women were working 56 hours a week for $6 a week, and half their children were dying before the age of 6. Sexual harassment, racial harassment, all that stuff was rampant. And one day the women said, enough, and they walked out. And there was a very wonderful song that was written at the time called The Bread and Roses. So it was ultimately given the name Bread and Roses Strike. And what the song related to was, we need bread to live, but we also need roses. And we're women, and as a result of the fact that we're women, we're also fighting for men because we are those men's mothers. And that is the caliber and the genuineness and the dignity of the woman's soul to say, I'll fight for men, I'll fight for old people, I'll fight for infirm people, I will do this for everyone. And in Canada, the sort of federal government's theme for International Women's Day this year is #MyFeminism. What does it mean to you? And for me, the one I picked was what it means to me as a older woman, sometimes a little older than I want to be, but is my job is to blaze the trail for others to follow, because others have blazed that trail for me, and my job is to take over from that and continue to blaze the trail. And as you know, I know, and many of the women watching this right now know, it's not easy to blaze a trail.
Hell no. It is not easy at all. And in fact, not only not easy, it's difficult as hell to blaze a trail. I mean, you're out there and you take, I mean, look at the number of women that were beaten mercilessly in the suffrage movement, you know, just to get the vote. It was appalling what went on, but we don't hear about that very much.
The occasional movie. Think about the amount of women who have been forced to live in an insane asylum or sanitarium at one time. Yeah. Because they didn't like, they were feeling depressed because they were being beaten, abused, used. And then, and of course, for you youngins out there, the whole word hysterectomy, removing a woman's internal reproductive system, is based on the Greek word hysteria, because it was thought if we remove a woman's reproductive organs, that's what's causing her to be hysterical. Oh, yeah. And not liking the bad treatment she's subjected to.
Yes.
Not that long ago.
No, it wasn't that long ago. And I mean, back even in the 50s, you know, women's hysteria. And if you look at movies from the 50s, especially the hysterical way that women were directed to act was really, really disturbing to see. Yes. You know, and because what it did was it supported the thinking at the time that women's emotions were, well, you know, they're just so emotional.
And fragile.
You know, and fragile and all that sort. And even my friend Velma Demerson, who wrote the book Incorrigible, she was in Toronto here. She was arrested for having married a Chinese man and was pregnant and put into the Mercer Reformatory here in Toronto, where they used these women to do the laundry for free. And they did medical testing on them. And Velma was medically experimented on, and her son was born with, well, I won't go into it, but that's just an example. And that was just like in the 20s here in Toronto. So it wasn't that long ago. Finally, this woman who is like 97 now, she finally sued the Ontario government and won to get an apology from them for what they did to her. You know, now there's an example of a woman who just kept moving along and kept doing her thing and kept stepping forward, and look what she was able to accomplish.
Absolutely.
You know?
And then when we look at things like the Me Too movement.
Yeah.
How many years have you fought and advocated? I won't remind you. And all of a sudden, it's gained some traction. Better late than never. But at least it's gaining that traction.
Yes, it is.
So it is a step forward. And it's a difficult conversation to have.
Yeah.
But as it gains momentum, people become, or women become, more supported to be able to step up to the plate and say, no, I'm actually going to talk about this. I'm not keeping this in the closet or bearing the responsibility.
Well, and yeah, because society really doesn't want to listen to it. People don't really want to hear it. they don't want to know, because what happens is the reason people don't want to hear, don't want to know things, is because if they do, then there's a feeling within them that maybe they need to take some responsibility. And what can I do? Or if I am an offender, then I need to take a look at myself. And if I'm not, how can I support, or how can I just not bash it? Not
Well, I'm
bash them
seeing,
for coming forward.
and I'm seeing a lot more men stepping up to the plate
Oh yeah,
and saying, I
yeah,
need to take responsibility.
yes, they are.
I need to help protect. This isn't me. I don't do this, but when I see another person doing it, I need to step up and say something.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an incredibly good thing to do. It needs to be, men need to be supported, I
For doing
believe,
this, yes.
for doing this.
Yeah,
It's
I
what they
agree.
should be doing.
I agree, because I would think that being a man in your male group, when you do step out, again, it's pioneering in a way. When they step away from the group of men and say that they will support women, it puts them also in a vulnerable position with their own gender. So it's a tough thing to do. It takes courage. It takes courage to stand up
Absolutely.
and to speak out. And bravo to all those that are doing it, men and women both, who are speaking up and stepping out on this issue. Because we have a whole group of young people, young girls and young boys that are coming behind, that we have a responsibility to stop this stuff.
And blaze the trail.
Yeah.
And make it safe, a safe trail to walk down.
Mm-hmm.
So that history doesn't have to repeat itself, because it's been repeating itself over and over and over again, and we're getting the same results.
Yeah.
That's Einstein's definition of insanity. So we have to do things differently.
Yeah.
Look at these young folks in Florida standing up. Isn't it sad that children have to stand up? It should be the parents.
Agreed.
Standing beside them, blazing the trail.
Yeah.
But the good thing is, at least they're feeling empowered and safe to do that.
Yeah. They're getting
Bravo.
enough support to do it. And yeah, it's they're getting the support, and that's a good thing. But then, of course, the media, that's a whole other subject, isn't it? whether it's gun violence or beauty or celebrity or Russia this, Russia that, Russia everything, it's media, we really need, I think, to change our where we get our news from. Because I just got to plug in here for a second. Sorry if there's a little bit of a camera shake. Where we get our news from, because we oftentimes the news does not report these kinds of things, even that we're talking about. I mean, the New York Times, apparently, though, this is something good. They've noticed that in their obituaries, they haven't been speaking about any famous women or women who have done great works. So they have decided to start naming some of the women who have passed along and have never been mentioned. So that's a step forward too. Even the New York Times, and there's just so many women. Like, I'll go back to, you have to be careful of media, because they will take a woman who's written a book or said something profound, or is a senator or whatever, and she will be pedestaled. Meanwhile, how many women are doing the everyday work of caring for both their children and their parents, or who are taking care of severely disabled children, or who are supplying food in helping to supply food for schools and things of that nature. The ones who are counseling at shelters and rape crisis clinics, who are being paid the lowest, while the directors of these institutions are making the money. Oh, That's a whole other issue right there. But there's so many, and all of the missing and murdered women whose names are never mentioned. They've gone into history without a name. You know, so we've got to stop this hierarchy of pedestaling some and forgetting the rest.
Absolutely.
You know?
Like Sharon, as you know, I mean, I can only speak with some sort of expertise when it comes to vulnerable and criminalized women in Ontario.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, these are the most vulnerable and marginalized women in the province who are living on the floor of the province, who don't have enough money economically. They have been victimized in terms of they have no safe place to live. They've been victims of emotional, physical, sexual abuse from childhood on. We say to them, well, why don't you just go get a job?
Oh, I know.
You're right. I should go work at a job when I've got all these things I'm trying to manage. And not everyone is as fortunate to have a safe place to live, food in their belly, medical treatment, and access to good education. And so, you know, we can turn around and criticize people in that situation, but we have not walked in their shoes. Their experience would blow your mind.
Yeah.
And some of them are able to somehow rise up from that and carry on and just live an ordinary, humble life where nobody's applauding them. Nobody's giving them raises or putting their name in the paper. But you're right. They're looking after their aging parent or parents. They're raising their children. They may have an abusive spouse. You don't know. Health concerns of their own. And trying to put it all together and get up every day and walk down that path day after day after day. And nobody's putting their name in the paper. And they're keeping the human race alive.
Yeah, I know. And like Becky was saying, speaking of jobs, wouldn't it be nice if we were afforded a day or two every month to enter the red tent with other, and I'm not sure what that is. I can't see it all, Rebecca, but I was reminded of some of the most important jobs in the world, like daycare, like teaching, like nursing. You know, these are vital because they form our young minds. And without proper education, love, compassion, and attention, we have a problem. I mean, you take a look at all of the poor children in these war-torn countries who are being born into and growing up in trauma, and we wonder why we have terrorists when they've lost their families or they've seen them burn in front of them or die in front of them. That changes the thinking and the brain of a young person. You know,
Sharon, I was just actually reading about a new act in the United States that's been passed called the Dignity for Incarcerated Women's Act.
Yeah.
Where there are prisons in the United States where women have to make a decision of, do I spend the little money I have to buy sanitary napkins or to spend an exorbitant cost so I can call my children?
Well, you see, because prisons in the States have become corporatized. And if we stand back and look at the planet Earth from the planet Pluto, the big picture of things, it's the cortocracy that is ruining and keeping everything down and ruining everything, because capitalism has become a dirty word. You know, it's been co-opted. It's the corporations that are running the world. They're running the governments. And how do we combat that? Don't buy what they're selling.
And I, for one, say down with bureaucratic oppression.
Oh,
because it's coming from every angle. It's disguised and it's sanitized
Yeah.
and it's flying under the radar, but that's exactly what it is
Yeah.
bureaucratic oppression.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
now
So
that
that's
we've
our two
solved those
cents worth.
problems,
So has anybody got any questions? I know it's interesting how these subjects are not something that people find fun. They don't necessarily want to be involved even or listen to it, but it's important to speak it. It's important to speak these things. And, you know, we both come from backgrounds of advocacy and that sort of thing, but we also have the fun side of ourselves too, you know? And, you know, I know that in the original post I put up, I said something about beauty versus vanity. You know, that's another thing that unfortunately we get caught up in too. As women, we're taught that our value is directly related to how youthful we can be throughout our lives. You know, and instead of accepting who we are as we age, still putting our best selves forward, you know.
absolutely.
You know, so
There's a big
it's,
difference between being your best and being vain about it.
yes,
I'm
absolutely.
too old to be vain. I don't have that opportunity.
Yeah,
But by the same token, when I put myself out there and I want to be listened to or heard, especially when I'm having to, what I'm seeing a lot of right now is ageism.
oh yeah, yeah.
And it's not even well disguised.
No, it's not.
But it's happening. And so by putting that package together the best way that you can, it helps you be more confident. It helps you role model to the next generation or to the
Yeah,
people that you're talking to. And
yeah.
sadly, I mean, it's too bad that you need to strive for credibility, but you absolutely have to.
Oh
Because
yeah,
in some cultures, older people are revered.
yes,
In our culture, they're cast aside. And that's a
absolutely there.
huge, it's a huge brain drain. It's a huge opportunity to learn
Uh-huh,
and not duplicate mistakes. And so
exactly.
that's why I blaze the trail. But when I'm blazing the trail, I damn well put my lipstick on. I
Oh
brush my
yeah,
hair
oh
and I
yeah.
look my best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because it's well documented that if you want to make an impression, you package it right. I've used this analogy before. If you had a cardboard box in front of you and a velvet covered box, which one would you open first? And of course, most people would open up the velvet covered box due to the perception of its content, because we automatically associate a diamond of some description in a velvet covered box. Well, as far as I'm concerned, that's the same as people. Not necessarily is there a diamond in a velvet covered box. And there could
Like
be,
that, the truth.
and there could be a diamond in a cardboard box. You know, so the trick is, if you want to influence, if you want to get your message across, then you do have to put your best foot forward. I wouldn't necessarily think that a velveteen jumpsuit would do the job, but you get the idea. You know, so but what happens is, in the media and the beauty industries, they have women thinking, no, it's not about that. What it is about my wrinkles and my pores and all that sort of thing. And that's what I really have to pay attention to when you know, that's really not the case at all. And so what happens is women end up spending gargantuan amounts of money to remain youthful, rather than embracing the matriarch within and stepping into the next chapter with self-assurance, self-acceptance, and wisdom. you know? So anyway, it doesn't appear like there's any questions. So I think that it's probably time that we come to the end of our time. And from my perspective, I'm going to leave a point, just a couple of beauty points, because that's kind of what I'm doing these days. Ladies, for eye pencils in your waterline, if you heat the pencil or the lead in the pencil just under the hot water before you apply it to your waterline, it will stay longer and better. And for guys and gals, throw away your chapstick and only use a Vaseline or vitamin E on your lips at night and on your cuticles. You will never want chapstick again. So that's my little tidbit for people. What have you got to offer there, Penny?
Well, I've got a really interesting and what might be enjoyable tip. My doctor told me that it was probably a healthy thing for me to have 1 glass of wine a day.
I think that's a good idea. Well,
it's a bit
yes.
of a big glass.
Yes, it's okay. 1 glass.
And it might last me till 3 o'clock this afternoon.
Yes.
And of course, I'm just making fun.
Yes.
I'd just like to say happy International Women's Day to all women out there. Keep blazing the trail. Do what you need to do. Stay strong. Be kind to yourself. And have the occasional glass of wine.
Here you go. Cheers, sis. Ciao, bellas.